Okay. Now on to consecutive versus simultaneous interpreting. That is on slide 7. If you go through our program with Lone Star, I'm not sure what colleges all of you guys go to. You may just be taking this course through Lone Star and maybe taking other courses at other universities or colleges. But in our program at least, interpreting 1, we focus on consecutive interpreting, and then in interpreting 2 and 3, we focus more on simultaneous interpreting and transliterating. What's funny, I think, and I was a student, so I know where you guys are coming from. I was so quick to be like, I don't want to do consecutive interpreting. I like simultaneous interpreting. I'm better at simultaneous interpreting. I forget stuff when I have to do the consecutive. So let me give you a quick example of each. Consecutive, and you see spoken language interpreters do this very often. Consecutive is where you hear a part of the message and then you sign it. And then you hear a part of the message and then you sign it. So you're holding on to all of that information, or vice versa. I watch a part of the information and then I voice it. I watch a part of the information and then I voice it. But I'm holding on to it. I'm not doing it at the same time. I'm definitely taking it in chunks and then producing a message one way or the other. Simultaneous, I guess technically simultaneous is a misnomer because nothing's ever 100% simultaneous. I would have to know their thought at the same time they do and be producing it at the exact same time. Well, but in essence, what we mean by simultaneous is I'm not holding long chunks of things. I'm trying to produce a message at the same time as listening or watching it. Listening to or watching it. So anyway, in general, that's what we mean by those terms. I thought that I would hate consecutive interpreting. I was like, oh my god, this is so boring. I have to watch and then voice, or I have to listen and then sign. What's funny is that after you do an entire semester of consecutive interpreting, when you get to the simultaneous semesters, you're like, oh my gosh, I want to go back to consecutive, because you lose your time. You know, you had all of this time to really think about a message and how you wanted to put it into grammatically correct ASL or English, and now all of a sudden, when you start doing the simultaneous, you start glossing more. You know, you're like, dog ran park. Oh, tomorrow. You know, and that's, that is horrible English. You know, you start sounding like Yoda when you are trying to, hungry I am, when you start voicing, or anyway, you look retarded when you're signing too, pardon the expression, but anyway, you're just not signing very well. So anyway, yeah, that's the difference between the two of them. Consecutive, you may even use them in the same situation. Consecutive, very often when I think of using consecutive, it's for something that I want to ensure that I'm getting the exact interpretation that I need to effectively convey that information. And you may think, well, you want to do that all the time, but I mean, I'm talking like, I'm in a doctor's office and, you know, it's imperative that that person completely knows the process of taking this medication. You know, you have to take 3 of them today, and then tomorrow you're going to take 3.5, and then the next day you'll take 4.5, and then the next day, you know, whatever. I want to make sure that I completely know what the process is before I go ahead and interpret that. Or a court case. Whew, I don't do court. Don't have any desire to do court. And I know a lot of interpreters who do simultaneous, but I tell you what, if I were doing court, I would absolutely want to do consecutive. Absolutely. Because, man, I would want to make sure that I was dead on with that. Or if I were doing an interrogation or anything that had to do with something legal, whew, I would want to do, you don't always have the opportunity to, and I recognize that, but I would want to do consecutive. I would even want time to talk to my team to make sure that we had the most well-formulated interpretation that we could before we produced a message. Sometimes in classrooms, for example, I will do mostly simultaneous, whether it's college or K through 12. I'll do mostly simultaneous, but then every now and then if I hear the teacher saying something and I'm not really sure where they're going with their thought process, I might hold on for a second and listen to it for a little bit and then be like, okay, blah, 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 you know, and then kind of catch up and not summarize, but give a full explanation of what they just said, but I had to see where they were going first, you know. Sometimes not even sometimes, ASL and English have completely different word order, and so if I don't know where the hearing speaker is going, or vice versa, if I don't know where the deaf speaker is going with something, I might ruin the punchline, I might get the time frame wrong. There are all kinds of things that I can mess up if I'm not doing consecutive. Consecutive is always going to be more accurate than simultaneous because you just have more time to effectively change around the semantics or the word order of the sentences that you're producing. So it's always, always, always going to be more effective. I highly suggest if you're doing consecutive that you take notes even. I don't see sign language to English, however you want to say that, interpreters do that very often, but I do see spoken language interpreters do it very, very often. So it's something to consider. I think that's pretty much most of what I wanted to say about that, but definitely different settings for each, or different reasons for using each in a setting, I should say. And so don't be biased toward one or the other necessarily. Give each one a good shot before you get into your interpreting classes. If you're already in your interpreting classes, maybe you can comment on some of that. Next, slide 8 talks about, again, our process is sign to voice and voice to sign. And as I've mentioned in multiple videos now, our consumers are anybody who's in the signed or voiced interpretation. So that would be our hearing consumers, deaf-blind consumers, anyone who is receiving the message or who I'm interpreting from the source language. Those are my consumers, period. Especially as far as the CPC defines things. Let me see, how am I doing on time? Okay, I'm not going to get too much into a description of the last slide of 9, just because your book goes into a lot of detail and has a nice chart in it of what this looks like. It shows the location of service professions, whether it's one-on-one, a small group, or a large group. And really what I love about how they outline that in their chart is that whether it's a mental health situation, whether it's a religious situation, whether it's a medical situation, you actually could have one-on-one, small group, or large group for any of those types of interpreting scenarios. You can't always think, oh, well, medical's always going to be consultative. Well, that's not necessarily true. If you're in a doctor's office and it's a one-on-one thing, then yeah, it probably is consultative. I don't know. They did a wonderful job of showing that. Also, I'm not going to get too much into a description of, or not even going to give a description really, of those different interpreting settings, just because one of our future chapters discusses in depth what each of those settings looks like. So go ahead and check out the part of your chapter that talks about the one-on-one, small group, and large group settings, and hopefully that'll give you a good idea of what that looks like. That's it for this week. Just make sure that you do your posting. Don't forget you do still have a posting despite having your exam. And good luck on your exam. That's it. I will talk to you guys soon. Thanks. Bye.